As the sun dipped below the horizon, 82-year-old Theodore Whitlock boarded a weathered fishing boat, his eyes gleaming with the determination of a man unafraid of death. The Bermuda Triangle had claimed thousands, but Theodore sought not escape, but answers. His final wish was clear: find the relic his father spoke of in his dying breath, a shard of an ancient artifact said to defy science itself. With each wave, Theodore's heart beat louder, not with fear, but with unyielding resolve. Theodore Whitlock had spent a lifetime chasing stories, not dreams. His career as a historian brought him face to face with countless mysteries, but none haunted him as deeply as the Bermuda Triangle. This fascination wasn't born of mere academic curiosity. It was deeply personal, a thread tangled in the fabric of his family's history. Theodore's father, Jacob Whitlock, had been a man of ambition and obsession, whose death left more questions than answers. Jacob was no ordinary man. A celebrated explorer in his youth, he spent the latter part of his life consumed by an enigma, an artifact rumored to exist at the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. He believed this relic was not just an ancient treasure, but a key to unlocking the mysteries of existence itself. His theories earned him ridicule in academic circles and estranged him from his peers. But for Jacob, the ridicule was a small price to pay for what he believed was the truth. Theodore, however, had no desire to inherit his father's obsession. As a young man, he dismissed Jacob's ramblings as the ravings of an old man chasing ghosts. While his father scribbled notes into his tattered leather journal, Theodore focused on his burgeoning career, determined to carve out a name for himself separate from his father's shadow. And he succeeded, until the night Jacob died. The elder Whitlock's final moments were shrouded in mystery. Theodore remembered the trembling voice, the words spilling out in a feverish whisper. "The key lies beyond fear. Find the shard, beyond the waters." Jacob's hand, once so strong, now weak and trembling, pushed the journal into Theodore's hands before life slipped away. Theodore didn't cry. He didn't even look at the journal that night. Instead, he buried his father and locked the memories away, throwing himself into his work. For decades, the journal sat untouched, its yellowed pages filled with sketches, coordinates, and cryptic notes. Theodore had no interest in revisiting the pain of his father's obsession, but time has a way of changing a man. As he aged, Theodore began to feel the weight of unfulfilled questions pressing on his chest. The journal called to him, not with the urgency of a scream, but with the persistence of a whisper. At night, he dreamt of the Triangle, a vast, endless expanse of ocean, filled with wonders. The moment of reckoning came when Theodore turned 82. His health was failing, and the doctors gave him a grim prognosis. For the first time in years, he opened his father's journal. The ink had faded, but the passion in those pages was undeniable. "The key lies beyond fear," Jacob had written again and again, as if trying to convince himself. Beneath one entry was a detailed map of the Bermuda Triangle, marked with coordinates and cryptic symbols. Theodore spent weeks in preparation. He sold what little he had of value and poured his life savings into funding a voyage. He knew the dangers. The Triangle was infamous for swallowing ships and planes, for stories of disappearances that defied logic. But Theodore wasn't afraid. If his father's obsession had any merit, then the answers to the greatest mysteries of life and death lay somewhere beyond those waters. He began assembling a crew. Finding people willing to sail into the Bermuda Triangle wasn't easy. He approached Iris Langley, a former Navy officer turned rogue captain. Known for her fearlessness and tactical brilliance, she was as unconventional as she was skilled. Iris had a reputation for taking dangerous jobs others wouldn't touch, provided the pay was good enough. "I need someone who can navigate through chaos," Theodore had told her during their first meeting. "Someone who doesn't flinch at the impossible." Iris studied him for a long time, her sharp blue eyes narrowing. "You're either insane or desperate, old man." "Both," Theodore admitted with a chuckle, but insanity has its merits. Next came Victor Kane, a young tech prodigy who had built a name for himself debunking myths and exposing hoaxes. Theodore needed someone who could keep the ship's systems running in unpredictable conditions, and Victor's cynicism was oddly reassuring. "I'll come along," Victor said, smirking, "if only to prove you wrong." The final addition to the crew was Camille Reyes, a marine biologist with an insatiable thirst for discovery. She had spent years studying the Triangle's strange anomalies and was eager to see them firsthand. For her, the voyage was as much about proving her theories as it was about satisfying her curiosity. With the crew assembled and the ship prepared, Theodore felt a strange mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Standing on the dock, staring at the vast expanse of ocean ahead, he clutched his father's journal tightly. This wasn't just a voyage into the unknown, it was a journey into the heart of a mystery that had consumed his family for generations. As the boat set sail, Theodore found himself staring at the horizon, his mind filled with questions. Would he find the relic his father had died searching for? Would he uncover the truth about the Bermuda Triangle? Or would he, like so many others, vanish without a trace? The answers lay ahead, beyond fear, beyond reason, and beyond the waters. The sea stretched infinitely, an unbroken sheet of blue under a sky that mirrored its expanse. On board the Resolute, Theodore Whitlock stood on the deck, the salt-laden breeze tangling his thinning silver hair. The ship creaked beneath him, groaning against the waves as it carved a path deeper into the triangle. Every creak, every gust of wind felt like a whispered warning. Yet Theodore's resolve only hardened. This wasn't just a voyage. It was a culmination of questions that demanded answers. Captain Iris Langley manned the helm, her jaw set in a way that left no room for doubt about her capability. She had seen her share of rough seas, but there was something different about this one. She caught Theodore's gaze as he studied the journal in his hands. "If you've got any doubts, now's the time to speak up," she said, her voice cutting through the rhythmic crash of waves. "No doubts," Theodore replied. "Just questions." Below deck, Victor Kane was busy tinkering with his equipment. The tech prodigy had brought along gadgets, sonar devices, electromagnetic field readers, and thermal imaging cameras. "You know this whole thing's a wild goose chase, right?" Victor called out as Camille Reyes descended the ladder. Camille rolled her eyes. "And yet, here you are, knee-deep in wires and circuits." "Curiosity pays the bills," Victor shot back, though his smirk lacked its usual arrogance. There was tension in the air that even his skepticism couldn't dismiss. Camille leaned against the wall, watching him work. "There's more to this place than superstition. The anomalies recorded here, time distortions, magnetic field disruptions, and unexplainable biological activity, they're real. You can't deny the data." Victor snorted. "Data is one thing. Haunted waters are another." Above deck, Theodore flipped through his father's journal, each page a map of desperation and genius. Jacob Whitlock had been meticulous in his documentation, sketching symbols and diagrams that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. One entry caught Theodore's eye. "When the stars align and the hum begins, the door will open." Beneath the text was a sketch of an intricate, circular design resembling a compass with indecipherable symbols. The first anomaly struck without warning. A low, resonant hum rippled through the air, setting every nerve on edge. Victor's equipment went haywire, monitors flickered, gauges spun erratically, and alarms blared. "What the hell is that?" Victor shouted, scrambling to stabilize his systems. Iris barked orders to the crew, her voice a steady anchor amidst the chaos. "Everyone, stay focused. We've got a storm brewing." But it wasn't a storm, not in the traditional sense. The sky above them seemed to ripple like water, clouds twisting and contorting as if obeying some unseen force. The compass on the helm spun wildly, and the ship began to drift, as if pulled by an invisible hand. Camille, gripping the railing, stared wide-eyed at the horizon. This isn't normal." Theodore, however, felt a strange calm. The hum wasn't just a sound, it was a call. He clutched the journal tightly, the symbols and diagrams now seared into his mind. "This is it," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "What's it?" Iris demanded, struggling to keep the ship steady. "The beginning," Theodore replied cryptically. He pointed to the coordinates in the journal. "We're close, closer than we've ever been." Victor emerged onto the deck, clutching a handheld device that seemed to be stabilizing. "I don't know what's going on, but we're picking up electromagnetic readings off the charts. It's like the entire area is alive." "It is alive," Theodore said. "The triangle isn't just a place, it's a system, a gateway. My father knew that. He just didn't live long enough to prove it." The ship lurched violently, throwing them all off balance. A blinding light erupted from the horizon, bathing the sea in an otherworldly glow. The light wasn't just bright, it was tangible, pulsing like a heartbeat. Camille clung to the railing, her scientific curiosity battling with primal fear. "We need to document this," she said, fumbling for her camera. "No time for that," Iris snapped. "We need to get out of here before we're torn apart." But Theodore stood firm. "No, we go forward." "Forward? Are you insane?" Victor shouted. "We don't even know what that is." "We don't need to know," Theodore replied, his voice steady. "We need to trust." The hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones. The light intensified and the ship began to move, not by the force of its engines, but as if drawn by the glow itself. Iris fought the wheel, but it was futile. "We've lost control," she shouted. Theodore stepped to the bow, his frail frame silhouetted against the blinding light. He held the journal aloft, its pages flapping wildly in the wind. "This is what we came for," he called out. "This is the door." As the ship hurtled toward the light, the world around them seemed to dissolve. Time stretched and folded, moments bleeding into one another in a kaleidoscope of sensations. Theodore closed his eyes, letting the journal guide him. "Hold on to something," he shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening hum. Then, silence. The light consumed them, and the Resolute disappeared into the unknown. The Resolute didn't feel like it was moving anymore, but the silence was deafening. Theodore opened his eyes and was met with darkness, a complete absence of light, space, or time. For a moment he wondered if this was what death felt like, a void where existence was suspended. Then, faintly, a low pulse began. It wasn't sound exactly, it was more like a vibration deep in his chest, a rhythm that brought awareness back to his senses. "Is everyone still here?" Iris's voice broke through, strained but steady. "I think so," Camille replied, though her voice quivered. "What just happened?" Victor groaned from somewhere in the darkness. "If this is what you call science, I want a refund." Theodore, still clutching his father's journal, felt the pages radiating warmth. He opened it, though he couldn't see anything. Yet somehow, the symbols glowed faintly, guiding his fingers to a specific page. He didn't understand the symbols, but he felt the meaning behind them. "Follow the pulse." "The pulse," Theodore whispered. "What?" Iris asked sharply. "What pulse?" "Listen," Theodore said, closing his eyes again. The vibrations were faint but rhythmic, like the heartbeat of something colossal and alive. "Do you feel that?" Camille gasped. "I do. It's faint, but it's there. It's coming from below." As if to confirm her words, the Resolute jolted violently, throwing them to the deck. A faint glow emerged in the distance, illuminating their surroundings. They were no longer on the ocean. Instead, they floated in an expanse of glowing mist, the waters beneath them shimmering with colors that shifted too quickly to name. "Where the hell are we?" Victor asked, scrambling to his feet and clutching his equipment, most of which was now unresponsive. "This isn't Earth. It can't be." "It's the triangle," Theodore said, his voice quiet yet firm. Or what's beyond it? My father was right. This isn't just a place. It's a system. A doorway. To what? Iris demanded, gripping the helm tightly, though it was clear the ship no longer obeyed her command. The glow intensified, and in its light they saw structures rising out of the mist, towering spires of crystalline material that seemed to hum with energy. The pulse grew stronger, resonating through the ship and their bodies. Theodore staggered to the bow, the journal in his hands glowing brighter with each step. "We have to go there," he said, pointing toward the largest spire, its surface covered in symbols identical to those in the journal. "Are you out of your mind?" Victor shouted. "We don't even know what that is. For all we know, it's the source of whatever's screwing with us." "Exactly," Theodore said. "It's the source. The answers are there." Iris hesitated, torn between her instincts to protect the crew and the undeniable pull of the unknown. Finally, she nodded. "We're not exactly swimming in options. Let's move." As the ship drifted closer to the spire, the air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made every hair on their bodies stand on end. The hum was deafening now, but Theodore seemed unaffected, his focus entirely on the glowing structure ahead. They reached the base of the spire where the ship came to an unnatural stop. A series of steps carved into the crystalline surface seemed to invite them upward. Theodore stepped forward, but Iris grabbed his arm. "We go together," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Victor groaned. "This is how every horror story starts." They ascended the steps cautiously, each one feeling like a step into another world. The closer they got to the top, the brighter the symbols on the spire glowed, until they reached a platform at its peak. In the center of the platform was a pedestal, and on it rested a shard of crystal, its surface pulsating with light. "The Relic," Theodore breathed, his voice filled with awe. He stepped forward, but Camille grabbed his arm. "Wait, we don't know what it does," she said, panic lacing her voice. "I know what it does," Theodore replied, his eyes locked on the shard. "It's the key to everything." Victor laughed nervously. "You mean the key to getting us killed?" Theodore ignored him. He reached out and touched the shard. The moment his fingers made contact, a wave of energy exploded outward, and the world around them shifted. The platform dissolved, and they were suspended in a vast, endless void filled with swirling light and sound. Images flashed before their eyes, ancient civilizations, stars being born and dying, and glimpses of beings that defied comprehension. It's showing us," Camille whispered, her voice trembling. "It's showing us everything." But Theodore saw more than the others. The shard wasn't just a key, it was a memory, a fragment of something far greater. He saw the truth of the triangle. It wasn't a place of death, but of transition, a nexus connecting realms. And the relic was a part of it, a piece of a puzzle that could unravel the very fabric of existence. Then, as quickly as it began, the visions stopped, and they were back on the platform. The shard still pulsed in Theodore's hand, but now it felt heavier, as if it carried the weight of the knowledge it had shared. What do we do now?" Iris asked, her voice uncharacteristically shaken. Theodore looked at the shard, then at the crew. "We have a choice," he said. "Take this knowledge back, or leave it here, where it belongs." Theodore held the shard in his trembling hand, its weight far heavier than it appeared. Around him, the crew stood in silence, their expressions a mix of awe and dread. The glowing spire pulsated as though alive, casting shifting patterns of light onto their faces. Theodore finally broke the silence. "This knowledge," he said, his voice hoarse, "it's more than we were ever meant to see." Victor, still pale from the visions, staggered forward. "You're saying we came all this way for a history lesson from aliens?" He gestured wildly at the shard. "Because that's what this feels like. We don't even know what we're holding." "It's not just knowledge," Camille said softly. "It's power. the kind that could change everything. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. Theodore interrupted. He stared at the shard, its light pulsating in rhythm with his own heartbeat. This isn't just an artifact, it's a test. Iris, her usual composure faltering, stepped closer to Theodore. So, what do we do with it? Because holding on to it feels like a bad idea. The shard pulsed as though responding to their voices. Theodore glanced at the journal in his other hand, its glowing pages seeming to guide him. The shard was the key, but also a warning. It's a choice, Theodore said, looking at each of them. We can take this back, but it'll change everything. Science, religion, humanity itself. Or we leave it here, where it belongs. Victor threw up his hands. Great. No pressure or anything. Before Theodore could reply, the air rippled and a deep, guttural sound echoed through the platform. The crew froze, their breaths catching as shadowy figures began to materialize around them. They weren't human. Their forms shimmered and shifted as though made of mist. Yet their presence was undeniable, watchful and ancient. "What the hell are those?" Victor whispered, his voice barely audible. "Guardians," Theodore said grimly. "They're here to ensure the shard isn't misused." "Misused how?" Iris asked, her hand going to the knife at her belt. "They won't let us leave with it," Theodore replied. "Not unless we prove we understand what we found." The shadowy figures moved closer, their forms growing more distinct. Camille stepped forward, her fear replaced by curiosity. "They're not attacking. I think they're waiting." Theodore nodded, flipping through the journal. The symbols rearranged, forming a pattern that resonated with the shard. "It's a test," he said. "They want us to show we understand the balance, the connection between worlds." "And if we fail?" Iris asked, her voice taut. "We don't leave," Theodore said simply. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Theodore placed the shard back on the pedestal, and the platform trembled. The shadowy figures encircled them as light erupted from the pedestal, enveloping the crew. The visions returned, clearer this time. Two worlds appeared, one like Earth, the other alien, its skies filled with strange constellations. The shard was a bridge between them, maintaining balance. But the visions also showed what could happen if that balance was broken. Cosmic destruction. Civilizations erased. Camille fell to her knees as the images flashed before her eyes. "It's too much," she whispered. "We're not supposed to see this." The light grew blinding as the visions reached their crescendo. Images of humanity's own hubris flashed. A planet exploited, a species always striving for dominance. The shard seemed to speak through the visions, showing the consequences of wielding such power irresponsibly. It wasn't just a warning, it was a plea. As the visions faded, the light dimmed, and the shadowy figures retreated. Theodore collapsed, his breath ragged. "It's not just a relic," he whispered. "It's a responsibility. If we take it, we risk everything." Victor ran a hand through his hair, pacing the platform. "So we leave it, just like that, after everything we went through?" "Not for nothing," Theodore said. "We've seen the truth. That's more than anyone else can say." The shard pulsed once more, brighter than before, as though acknowledging their decision. Theodore placed the journal beside it. "It all stays here," he said firmly. The platform trembled again, and the shadowy figures began to fade. The shard's glow softened, its pulsations slowing. The crew descended the steps in silence, the weight of what they had experienced pressing heavily on them. When they reached the ship, the mist receded, revealing the vast expanse of ocean. The Resolute groaned as it regained buoyancy. Iris took the helm, guiding them away without a word. As they sailed back into the open sea, Theodore stood at the bow, staring at the horizon. The answers he had sought for a lifetime were finally his, but they came at a cost. The Bermuda Triangle was no longer a mystery. It was a guardian of something far greater than humanity could understand. He closed his eyes, the faces of his crew lingering in his mind. They hadn't come back empty-handed, not truly. The knowledge they carried, the bond they now shared, it was enough. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky with streaks of gold and crimson, Theodore whispered to the horizon, "It's better this way. Some truths aren't meant to be wielded." The Resolute cut through the waves with an eerie quietness, as though the ocean itself had grown still to reflect the crew's mood. No one spoke. The weight of their decision lingered in the air, unspoken but palpable. Theodore stood at the bow, his hands gripping the railing as he stared into the horizon. The knowledge he carried felt heavier than the shard itself. He had sought answers, and he had found them. But some truths, he realized, were not meant to be shared. Camille broke the silence first. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Her voice was tentative, almost a whisper. Victor snorted from his seat near the ship's console. "Believe what? That we saw glowing aliens, an ancient relic, and visions of universal collapse? Sure, Camille. Let's write that down and send it to the nearest science journal." "It's not about convincing anyone," Theodore said quietly, his gaze still fixed ahead. "It's about knowing. What we've seen. It's not for the world to understand. Not yet." Iris, standing at the helm, glanced at him. "Not yet? Or not ever? What happens when someone else comes looking for it? Someone who doesn't understand what we've seen?" Theodore turned to face her. "That's why we made the right choice. We left it behind, protected. The triangle isn't just a mystery. It's a shield, a gatekeeper. If anyone else finds it, it'll test them just as it tested us." "And if they fail?" Camille asked, her voice trembling. "They won't come back," Theodore said simply. The crew lapsed into silence again, each lost in their own thoughts. The ocean stretched endlessly around them, a vast and indifferent expanse. But the journey wasn't over. The Resolute still had to cross the same treacherous waters they had entered, and the Triangle wasn't known for letting its visitors leave easily. As if in response to that thought, the sky began to darken. Storm clouds rolled in from the east, their movements unnaturally fast. The wind picked up, howling through the rigging. Iris tightened her grip on the wheel. "Here we go again," she muttered. Victor scrambled to secure his equipment. "Please tell me this is just a regular storm." "It's not," Camille said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Look at the waves." The ocean had begun to churn, but not in the way storms usually disturbed the sea. The water moved in unnatural patterns, spiraling inward toward a point just ahead of the ship. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Theodore's chest tightened. He recognized the sound. It was the same hum they had heard before the spire appeared. "It's the triangle," he said. "It's not done with us." Iris swore under her breath. "Hold on! I'm not letting this thing take us without a fight." The Resolute pitched violently as the waves rose, towering over the ship like walls of liquid glass. The hum grew deafening, and the air around them seemed to shimmer. Camille clung to the railing, her knuckles white. "What's happening?" "It's pulling us back," Theodore shouted over the noise. "The triangle doesn't want us to leave." Victor's face was pale as he held onto a beam for dear life. "You said we passed the test. Why won't it let us go?" Theodore didn't answer. He didn't know. The journal was gone, the shard left behind, but the triangle wasn't finished with them. It was as if the very fabric of reality twisted around the ship, bending and warping the world into a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Iris fought to keep the ship steady, her arms straining against the wheel. "I can't hold it much longer. It's pulling us in." Theodore closed his eyes, letting the hum vibrate through his body. It wasn't just sound. It was a language, a message. The triangle was speaking to him, and for the first time, he thought he understood. It wasn't anger or malice that held them captive. It was something deeper, something primal. "We need to let go," Theodore said suddenly. "What?" Iris shouted. "Let go of what?" "Control," he replied. "We're fighting it, but we're not supposed to. It's guiding us out, if we let it." "That's insane," Victor yelled. "How do you know that?" "I just do," Theodore said. "Trust me. Trust it." Iris hesitated, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. The ship groaned under the strain of the waves, the wind howling like a living thing. Finally, with a muttered curse, she let go of the wheel. The Resolute lurched, and for a moment it felt as though they would be swallowed whole. Then, suddenly, the ship stabilized. The hum softened, the waves subsided, and the wind died down. The triangle released them. The crew stared at each other in stunned silence as the ocean around them returned to an almost unnatural calm. The storm clouds dissipated, revealing a clear sky dotted with stars. Camille collapsed onto the deck, her breath coming in gasps. "We're alive," she said. "I can't believe we're alive." Victor slumped against the railing, his hands shaking. "What the hell just happened?" "The triangle let us go," Theodore said, his voice calm. "It tested us one last time, and we passed." Iris took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she returned to the wheel. Let's not wait around for it to change its mind. As the Resolute sailed into the open sea, Theodore leaned against the railing, the events of the journey replaying in his mind. They had entered the Bermuda Triangle searching for answers, and they had found them. But the cost was one he would carry for the rest of his life. The crew would return to their world changed, burdened with knowledge they could never share. The Triangle had shown them its truths, but it had also ensured that those truths would remain its own. Some mysteries, Theodore realized, were meant to stay unsolved. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Theodore whispered to himself, "We're not leaving empty-handed. We're leaving whole." The shoreline came into view as the Resolute broke free from the last vestiges of the Triangle's waters. The familiar sight of civilization, scattered lights along the coast and distant buildings piercing the morning fog, should have brought relief. But for Theodore and the crew, the sight felt surreal, like stepping back into a world that no longer felt like their own. Victor was the first to speak, his voice flat. "So, what do we tell them?" "The truth," Camille said immediately, though her voice wavered. "We owe it to the world to tell them." Victor laughed bitterly. "Tell them what? That we found an ancient glowing shard guarded by shadowy mist creatures in the Bermuda Triangle? That we passed some cosmic test and left behind a relic that could unravel existence? They'll laugh us out of the room." "She's right, though," Iris said, steering the ship closer to the docks. "What we found, what we saw, it's bigger than us. The world has a right to know." Theodore turned to them, his face calm but resolute. "No, the world isn't ready for this truth. Not yet." Camille stared at him, shocked. "You can't mean that. Theodore, this isn't just about us. This is about humanity, about understanding who we are and what's out there." "And that's exactly why we can't share it," Theodore replied firmly. "What we saw, the power of that shard, it's not something humanity is prepared to handle. Imagine what would happen if the wrong people knew about it. Wars would be fought over it. Millions could die. No, this knowledge must stay hidden." Victor leaned against the railing, his exhaustion clear. "So what? We just pretend this never happened? Go back to our lives and act like we didn't see the universe laid bare?" "No," Theodore said, his voice softening. "We don't forget. We carry this with us, but we do so quietly. The Triangle will guard its secrets just as it always has, and so will we." The ship docked with a gentle bump, and the crew began unloading in silence. Their return was unceremonious. No crowds, no reporters, just the quiet solitude of a forgotten port. It felt fitting, somehow. This wasn't a story for the world to hear. As the crew gathered on the dock, Iris turned to Theodore. "So, what now? Do we just go our separate ways?" Theodore looked at each of them, his heart heavy. "We've been through something no one else can understand. That binds us, whether we like it or not. But this is where our paths diverge. You have your lives to live, and I have mine. What matters is that we've done what's right." Camille stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't want to forget. I don't want to lose this, what we've shared, what we've seen." "You won't forget," Theodore said gently, "but we have to let it go, for the sake of the world, and for ourselves." One by one the crew departed, Victor muttering about finding a strong drink, Camille clutching her notebook like a lifeline, Iris giving Theodore a lingering glance before disappearing into the mist. Theodore remained on the dock, watching them go, his heart heavy, yet strangely at peace. He turned back to the Resolute, now empty and silent, its hull still bearing the scars of their journey. The ship had carried them into the unknown and back, a testament to human courage and curiosity. But it was more than that. It was a symbol of the delicate balance between seeking answers and knowing when to let mysteries remain. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, Theodore climbed back aboard the ship. He didn't know what his future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would spend the rest of his days guarding the memory of what they had found, carrying the weight of their decision, and trusting that they had done the right thing. From his cabin, he watched the horizon, where the ocean stretched endlessly. Somewhere out there, the triangle still existed, guarding its secrets, waiting for the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to seek its truths. Theodore whispered to the waves, his voice full of both gratitude and sorrow. "Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some are meant to be kept." The Resolute creaked softly in response, as if agreeing. And with that, Theodore turned away from the sea, ready to face whatever time he had left with a quiet resolve, knowing he had played his part in a story far greater than himself.